Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and I've got another podcast episode for you guys today. I wanted to start off this podcast with a little bit of an announcement, and I'm going to repeat this in my next podcast episode too, because I know some people are here for the book-themed podcasts and some people are here more for the crafty-related ones. But I'm going to be making a couple of changes to my channel just so that I can keep up with a more sustainable filming schedule. I am currently working full-time and am intending to continue that during the following school year. So I do need to decrease my number of weekly videos. So I'm only going to be putting out one video a week from now on until some other schedule change comes along. And with that, I'm going to have 2 podcast episodes a month and 2 other videos a month. So with my podcast episodes, I'm going to call anything where I'm sitting in this room and just talking to a camera all in one take a podcast, to differentiate it from my tutorials and vlogs. Vlogs being filming something I'm doing out and about or segments of a project I'm working on, and tutorials obviously being teaching you, the viewer, how to do something. My podcasts are going to be split between crafting related podcasts, which will be the one that I put out next, and book related podcasts, which are going to be like this one. So I'm still going to continue my podcast where I show you everything I read in a given month, as well as any books I may have purchased or brought into my collection, just so that you can see what I'm up to reading wise as well as crafting wise. So that probably means fewer updates on things like craft projects, but I think that's going to make it so that I'm not going crazy trying to maintain a filming schedule along with all the other things that I'm trying to do. So that'll just kind of be how things go from now on. And thanks for being patient with changes and me taking a week off here and there and all that stuff. I'm hoping that this is going to work better for me so that I can continue putting things on the channel in a way that makes sense for my work-life balance schedule situation. With that being said, this is going to be another Everything I Read podcast. So this is everything I read in March of 2024. I also have a book haul, actually 2 separate book hauls to show you, where I brought some new books into my collection. So we'll get to go over those too. But first, the books that I read in March. So the first one that I read in March was called Pieces of Blue by Holly Goldberg Sloan. This is one that I picked up from a little library, and I originally grabbed it because it takes place in Hawaii, which is somewhere I used to go with my family growing up, so I like books that take place in that setting, and since this one seemed kind of true crime, a little, not true crime, but like borderline between like a mystery and like an emotional novel, I wanted to try it out. I also noticed that this is the same author as the book Counting by Sevens, which I haven't read, but a lot of my students were reading it. So I thought it was kind of funny that I was reading a book by the same author at the same time that some of them were reading Counting by Sevens, which I know is more of a middle grade novel. But this one was about a family who moved to Hawaii after their father passes away in an accident. And you kind of start following the family as they're both adjusting to life after the death of their father, but also kind of unveiling details about them as the story goes on that kind of lead you to believe that not everything is as it seems. I did really enjoy reading this book, although it's not one that I want to keep in my permanent collection. So I think I will be putting it in my pile of books to swap, which I'll get back to that in a second, but I have kind of a fun idea for books to swap. But I would recommend this if you like kind of emotional books, but also since it does have that mystery element, make sure that that's something you're up for too, because I wouldn't put it purely in the like contemporary fiction novel category. It definitely has a very strong mystery element to it that I did quite enjoy. The second book that I read this month was an audiobook. I'm continuing reading the Lunar Chronicles series, or rereading the Lunar Chronicles series by Marissa Meyer. So I finished the book Scarlet. I listened to it on Audible. You can actually probably see at the bottom that I'm currently listening to the third one. Scarlet is a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood in this cyberpunk futuristic setting that Marissa Meyer has created for the Lunar Chronicles. Highly recommend it, especially if you read the first one, but if you haven't, you would definitely be lost jumping into the second book. They don't really function as standalone novels. This is not my favorite book in the Lunar Chronicles. I really like the first one and the third one. I don't think I read the fourth one before, and definitely not any of the like novellas, or there's like a fifth book. But Scarlet is the one that I remembered the fewest details from it, although there's a lot of really interesting world building that comes into play with Scarlet, because Cinder, which is the first book in the series, takes place in the, I think they call it the Asian Commonwealth, which is a bunch of countries in Asia that have combined kind of into one country. So you get a lot of Asian influence into how the government is run and cultural things that the characters are doing. But Scarlet takes place in what we would consider France, which is still called France in the book, but it's part of some sort of a European Union. So there was more French culture sprinkled throughout. Not as much as there was Asian influence in Cinder, but I still found it really cool to see how the author is blending like real cultural factors into this very futuristic sci-fi fantasy world that she has created. But in general, you would love the Lunar Chronicles series if you like creative fairy tale retellings. I also recently found out that it is Sailor Moon fanfiction, and once I heard that, I can't unsee it anymore. But I did watch Sailor Moon when I was a kid, so I don't really mind that aspect so much. I just thought it was funny to figure that out, and also kind of shocked that I never figured it out before. The first book very much is centered around a missing princess from the moon, which if you've watched the Sailor Moon cartoons, that's a really big plot point in those cartoons as well. Not to mention the fact that Sailor Moon also has quite a few fantasy or fairy tale retelling aspects to it. So was kind of excited to find out that little tidbit about this series, but I'm enjoying the reread. I definitely am glad that I chose to do a reread with audiobooks for this one. It's been kind of a comforting like background noise thing for me to have those going and kind of revisit some familiar characters that I really enjoy reading about. I am having a lot of fun reading the third one right now, which is Cress, and Cress is based off of Rapunzel, which is probably one of my favorite fairy tales, and definitely one of my favorite like Disney princess versions of a fairy tale. So I'm having a lot of fun listening to Cress. But going back to books I read in March, the third book I read in March was Medusa by Jessie Burton. And this is a retelling of the Medusa myth that just has absolutely beautiful artwork in it. I'll show you an example of a spread. So it was a really fast read because it's only like just over 200 pages, but there's a lot of like full spread illustrations in it. And this, I think, would work really well for a high school, like upper high school aged kid who has burned through Percy Jackson and is looking for some more Greek myth things. Even though this book is short, it's definitely deals with some more mature emotional things, as well as if you're familiar with the myth of Medusa, there are obviously some big topics within that myth that are more appropriate for older readers. But this was a very like personal and deep way of retelling the myth from the perspective of Medusa, who is at both in the myth and in this retelling a teenage girl. So I found this to be a really moving version of this story, and I highly recommend it. This was also a little library find, but I will probably hold on to it and donate a different book in its place to kind of balance out the little library microcosm that we have. The next book that I read in March is called A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by J. Penner. And this is the first book in a new series called Adenashire. I'm not sure how she's pronouncing it. This was Great British Bake Off in a D&D setting, is basically what it was. It was cheesy, it was fluffy, had like a romance subplot that didn't go like too far into the romance side of things. Definitely the baking was more the main focus of the plot line. I won't say that this is like incredible life-changing literature, but it was fun and I really liked it. I purchased this on Amazon after seeing it on TikTok because it was the only place that I could find it. There is supposed to be another book coming out, I believe in November, but I think you can already read the second book on Kindle right now if you're interested, but since I had the first one in paperback, I want to get the second one in paperback as well. But this was absolutely adorable. Definitely like magical friends and baking is the vibe. So if you like, even if you don't like D&D, if you just like baking and cozy fantasies, like this is definitely for you. It's actually not specifically Dungeons and Dragons related, but a lot of the character archetypes used, as well as the types of the species of the characters, are very much D&D influenced, as far as I can tell. Highly recommend if you want something just kind of cozy and fun to read. It's a pretty fast read as well. It's only like 250 pages and there's some recipes at the back, so just delightful. The next book I read was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I read Station 11 maybe a year or two ago, and I really liked Station 11. So I had high hopes for this book. This one didn't hit as much as Station 11 did for me. Oh, there's a bookmark in there. I should take that out. This book I loved the concept. It's following multiple timelines throughout different points in both history and the future about kind of a strange occurrence that happens that multiple people have influence over and are affected by, without trying to give too much of it away. I really liked the world building of this, but it kind of just fell flat. I don't know if I was missing something, like maybe I got interrupted while reading and missed like a key paragraph, but this didn't feel as impactful to me as Station 11 did. It felt more like it was trying to do something, but that is me as a reader saying that, and also someone who's not a huge fan of speculative fiction, which this definitely was. So if you do like speculative fiction, you should probably try this out. But also, if you like speculative fiction, you've probably already read this because it is a pretty popular one. This was a little library find for me. I will be putting it back in my pile of books to swap and redistribute. The next book I was really pleasantly surprised by. I found this book in a little library and grabbed it because I thought it was going to be a cheesy rom-com, purely because of the cover. Read the inside flap, got the part where the main character is a plus-size influencer and that she was going to a former best friend's wedding as like an emergency stand-in bridesmaid. Didn't really pay attention to the inside flap beyond that. Was very pleasantly surprised, like not even halfway in, that this is a murder mystery. This is not a rom-com, although it does have some rom-com elements to it. Definitely the setup felt very rom-com, of being invited to be a last-minute bridesmaid in a friend's wedding, like huge, big budget, celebrity status wedding, and then the bride turns up murdered the night before the wedding is supposed to take place. So, love that. Wasn't expecting it. And I was explaining to both my mom and a friend that this style of cover right now is almost exclusively used for romance books. Like, think I can't even think of a good example right now, like the Well Met series or anything by Emily Henry, or even to a certain extent like the Crazy Rich Asians book. They all have this very like cartoony cover style and like fairly minimalist cartoony cover style. So I immediately just assumed this was going to be that genre of book, but was really excited to be wrong. I was reading this on, I have the physical book, but I was also reading it partially digitally from the library because there was a point where I was waiting for something and looking for something to read and saw it was immediately available from my library, so just decided to continue where I left off digitally. So I was reading in public when I got to the point where you find out that it's a murder mystery, which I don't think it was a secret. I think it does say this in the synopsis, but it was a surprise to me. So reading that part in public and kind of just having to process, like, wait, what's happening in this book was really fun. And I definitely finished it really, really quickly after that. So highly recommend Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner, I think is her name. Loved this book. Will be keeping it. This one was also one that I found in a little library. I don't know if I said that. Oh. I've been fighting the tail end of a cold for like 3 weeks now. I was subbing, long-term subbing in 5th grade for like 4.5 months. My system waited until the week before I transitioned to a different grade to finally get a cold, which I'm surprised I held out that long, but it definitely hit me harder than it used to. The last book that I read this month is Dark and Shallow Lies by Ginny Myers Sain. It was okay. I ended up kind of skimming through it. The premise was really interesting. It takes place in Louisiana. It's a group of kids who are all born around the same time, who all have some sort of like psychic abilities. But somehow that was like a really small part of the plot, at least to me. So I ended up kind of like skimming through this. I will definitely be redistributing this back into the little library book donation world. I wouldn't recommend it. It was fine. Like, if I had nothing else to read, I'd read it, but it wasn't my thing. And I had a couple of other books by this author on my TBR list, which I still kind of want to try a different one by the same author because I think her writing style was good. I think this particular story just didn't do anything for me. So, Dark and Shallow Lies, probably going to get rid of it somehow. Which, speaking of getting rid of books, before I dive into my 2 book hauls, I am planning on doing a book swap party. I tried to do this for my birthday, but we ended up picking a weekend that just didn't work for anybody and people were sick. So that ended up being a pretty small affair. But we want to do a summer reading kickoff for our friends early into summer break. And basically turn our house into a little library for a day and let people swap books in and out. And then kind of redistribute books into little libraries after. So I'm kind of holding on to books that I don't personally want to keep in my collection and just making stacks of them so that I have enough of a collection for people to swap with when we have that party. So all the books in that stack that I said that I would not be keeping, I'm going to hold on to them until we have that party. So for now, they won't actually be going anywhere. But I think of those ones I talked about, the only ones I'm keeping are Medusa, A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic, and Big Summer, which A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic I purchased. So, but that was the only one here that I purchased, I believe. I think the rest were free books. But moving on to some book hauls. So I have 2 stacks of books over here to show you. One stack is from my grandparents' house. The other stack is from Half Price Books. So beginning with the stack from my grandparents' house, my grandmother has a lot of books in her house. And we were kind of helping her move some furniture. My brother was taking a dresser for his house, and I asked if I could look through and borrow some books. So this first stack of books is all books that I borrowed from her, or in the case of one book that my husband borrowed from her. So I figured I'd show you those just to have some more books to talk about. So the first book here, I technically have already read. This is The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. And the story behind why I say I have technically read this book. So when I was in high school, my local library where I grew up was doing a community read-along thing. A lot of communities do this now. Some of them call it One Book, One Zip Code. Some of them call it like the All Community Read. There's like a couple different names for it, but basically the idea is that you get your entire town, community, whatever it is, to read the same book so that you can do events and like book talks about it. And when I was in high school, because I was so involved with the library, I was allowed to be the teen representative for the committee that would decide what our community book would be. And they had created a bunch of selections and split up who read which one to determine which one would be the all-city read. This is the book that I was assigned. I understood none of it when I read this in high school. And if you don't know what this book is about, it centers around the Chicago World's Fair in, I forget what year it is, but the Chicago World's Fair that was in early 1900s, I believe. But also the H.H. Holmes true crime case, which now as an adult and now as someone with an interest in true crime, which I did not have when I was in high school, I know who H.H. Holmes is. I know all about the quote-unquote murder hotel that he built in Chicago, and now know that that is the backdrop of this book, hence why it's called The Devil in the White City. That was, I believe, a nickname for H.H. Holmes. So I am very excited to reread this now with the understanding I already have about the H.H. Holmes case, because I think that will make this book make a lot more sense, whereas high school me did not understand any of it. So I'm excited to give this one a try again, and was glad that my grandmother had it so that I could borrow it. There actually is another book that I'm just now realizing I left upstairs, but it's called, let me look up the title on my story graph and I'll show you from here, because I just started reading it. And this was the one that prompted me to, nope, not read recently. I want the ones I'm currently reading. This is the one that prompted me to ask if I could borrow some of her books. But it's called When Evil Came to Goodhart by Marty Jo Link. And this is what the cover looks like. This is a true crime book, so completely nonfiction. But it takes place close to the area where my family used to go on vacations as a kid. So I was really intrigued when I saw it and went like, oh, that, like, I know where that is. Can I borrow this book? Had no idea that there was a cold case that takes place there. So I'm currently reading that as well, and that is also one borrowed from my grandmother. But I left it upstairs next to my reading chair, and I'm not going to go get it in the middle of a podcast. But it's about a family that was murdered in their vacation home one night, or they don't even know if it was at night because it took so long for people to discover that it had happened. I think it was like a couple weeks later that they discovered the bodies. But I'm only a couple pages into it, so I just got through the description of the crime scene. But I'm really excited to read that because I had no idea that that case happened so close to where we used to go on vacation. Is it gonna make me hesitant to go up there ever again? Yes, probably. But that's okay. I'm just excited to have a new true crime case to kind of delve into, because I feel like I've gotten to a point with my true crime podcast and YouTube things that I watch where I've seen the same cases over and over again, so it's really exciting to have a new one to kind of dive into for a while. The next book I borrowed from my grandmother is House of Sand and Fog. I don't remember why I grabbed this one. It's a suspense novel, or like a thriller. I'll just read the back because I genuinely don't remember why I grabbed this one. It says, in this riveting novel of almost unbearable suspense, 3 fragile yet determined people become dangerously entangled in a relentlessly escalating crisis. Colonel Bayrani, once a wealthy man in Iran, is now a struggling immigrant willing to bet everything he has to restore his family's dignity. Kathy Niccolo is a troubled young woman whose house is all she has left, and who refuses to let her hard-won stability slip away from her. Sheriff Lester Burden, a married man who finds himself falling in love with Kathy, becomes obsessed with helping her fight for justice. Drawn by their competing desires to the same small house in California hills and doomed by their tragic inability to understand one another, the 3 converge in an explosive collision course. Combining unadorned realism with profound empathy, House of Sand and Fog marks the arrival of a major new voice in American fiction. So, I think I literally just saw the word suspense on the back and grabbed it because I'm a thriller fan, but now I'm thinking maybe this isn't really a thriller. I don't know. I'll have to read it to find out. It does have the little Oprah's Book Club sticker on it, which I don't know if that means anything to me, but it means people read it and somebody liked it, so might as well try. The next one I picked up was Empire of Deception. I believe this one was also a true crime one. I don't remember if this is fiction. No, this is nonfiction. My grandmother really likes history books. She reads a lot of it's not James Michener, it's a different author who kind of does kind of what James Michener does. I say that not having read a single James Michener book, but kind of like telling the history of an area. She has a lot of those books. I can't remember what the author is, but I know she's been reading one about London forever because they're really long books. But she generally likes history, historical fiction, stuff like that. So that's why a lot of these are kind of history related. This one, I'll just read the back of this one too, because, well, no, I'll summarize it. It's, another true crime case, kind of in the Al Capone era of Chicago, and it's about a lawyer named Leo Koritz who scammed people, is pretty much what it is. But I thought it looked interesting, and I'm trying to read some more nonfiction because I generally am not a big nonfiction reader. That was part of why I was so excited to find that Evil Comes to Good Heart book, just to kind of revamp my nonfiction reading. Although generally when I do read nonfiction, it's in the like crime category or the science category, and those are really the only two, or memoirs occasionally, but that feels like a different genre to me, even though I know it's not. The next book, honestly, I didn't look at this one. My husband wanted to read this one. This one is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. It's about, I don't even remember, something about World War II and something about running, because my husband is a runner. So he picked that one. That one was not my pick. I probably won't read it. Sorry. Next book is The Piano Teacher by Janice Y.K. Lee. This one was a historical fiction. Takes place in 1942 with a socialite in Hong Kong and a lady who gets hired as a family's piano teacher. So just a historical fiction book. Excited to try it. Historical fiction is also another category that I don't read a ton of, so I would like to try some more. The next two I grabbed and then realized that my mom had read them. The first one is called Chasing Cezanne by Peter Mayle. This one is an art heist looking thing, and I kind of laughed when I read this one because I was reading the book Chasing Vermeer with my 5th graders. This quite genuinely looks like Chasing Vermeer for grown-ups. This book did come out before Chasing Vermeer, so maybe the author of Chasing Vermeer took some influence from this. But yeah, is this fiction? I assumed it was fiction. Maybe it isn't. Oh, it says it's a novel, so yes, it's fiction. I suddenly was wondering if a Cezanne piece had actually been stolen at some point. But this looks very fun. Art heist mystery thing. The next one is definitely nonfiction, but it's by the same author. So this is French Lessons, Adventures with Knife, Fork, and Corkscrew, again by Peter Mayle. It's about cooking and food and restaurants, just kind of little things in Paris. Looked pretty good. Again, trying to add some more nonfiction to my life, so that was one of those selections. And the last one I took from my grandparents' house is This Is Where I Leave You by Jonathan Tropper. This one looked very familiar. I don't know if it was in like a bestseller list at some point. But this one is just kind of romantic, emotional novel, family drama, stuff like that. So it just looked good. Honestly, the cover looked cool, so I grabbed it. Sometimes that results in really good book picks, and sometimes it does not. Alright, my next stack of books to show you I got from Half Price Books. And the reason I went to Half Price Books is, A, I wanted to get a couple more books to kind of round out my selection for this book party that we're going to have. But also I had a gift card. So I made a beeline to the clearance section. The gift card I had was for $25. I spent $25.52. So all the books I'm going to show you, I only paid 52 cents for, which I think is a pretty good deal. Again, these were all in the clearance section. It started with, I was just trying to get ones that looked cool that I could swap with friends, but I think some of these I'm at least going to have to read first because they look really good. I, of course, because I was looking for other people, found books that I want to keep. That's just how it goes. Alright, first one is the Eyre Affair. Eyre as in Jane Eyre. I know the sticker's kind of covering it. But this is a detective mystery, but it's a like alternate history Great Britain. So it takes place in 1985, but time travel and cloning are regular things. So it's a detective who has to investigate a mystery where fictional characters are being stolen from their books. Great premise. This sounds fascinating. But again, grabbed this one thinking like, oh, like, it's a mystery. A lot of my friends like mysteries. I'm gonna have to read this before I let somebody take it from my collection. So, that was a failed attempt at buying books for other people. But I'm excited to read this one. It looks like it's part of a series. Oh, and then the review on the front says, The Eyre Affair combines elements of Monty Python, Harry Potter, Stephen Hawking, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Those are all vibes that I can appreciate. But yeah, that just, what a premise for a book. That one seems wild. The next one is also a mystery. It's called Yarned and Dangerous by Sadie Hartwell. I had to read it from the side because the sticker covers the front. This is a main character who moves back to her hometown. There's a yarn shop and murder, apparently. Oh yeah, when one of the town's most persnickety knitters turns up dead in a pile of cashmere yarn. So, yarn, murder, clearly a cat. I'm sold. I'm definitely going to have to read this one. It also says it includes knitting patterns. That's very exciting. Oh, it includes multiple knitting patterns. That's very exciting. There's one for a scrap yarn wallet, a lavender sachet, a felted wool handbag, and that's it. But yeah, I'm going to have to try this one too. It looks like it's the start of a series because it says it's a Tangled Web mystery, but as far as I can tell, this is the first one in the series. I couldn't find any indicators that there are other ones that come before this. So, Yarned and Dangerous, which also just incredible puns for book titles like this. The next one, I wanted to get a couple of nonfiction books because I know a lot of our friends are nonfiction readers, but I generally go for very quirky nonfiction or true crime. Ended up finding two that I think I'm going to have to read. So I am going to have to do a lot of reading before we have this party. This is the Ninja Handbook by the International Order of Ninjas. There's no author listed. And it says, this book looks forward to killing you soon. Delightful. It says, deadly ninja wisdom for the non-ninja. Carefully consider the joy of your soft-headed ignorance before you begin to run, flip, and jump along the ninja path. So it says it's a instructional book. It says, for the true of heart or extremely lucky, this powerful and honorable manuscript contains such phenomenal ninja wisdom as how to create and name your very own lethal ninja weapon, the proper weapon to use when fighting a vampire pumpkin, why clowns and robots are so dangerous on the internet, easy to follow charts showing when to slice and when to stab, and other references to random things. So I have no idea what this book is. I don't even know if it really counts as nonfiction. But it looks funny. There's a lot of pictures in here and a lot of like fill in the blank little things. Yeah, I don't know how to describe this book. I'm going to have to read it and then let you know because it looks ridiculous. The next one I picked up, also nonfiction, called Historical Irish Oddities by Alan Foster, a compendium of extraordinary but true tales. This one says, Historical Irish Oddities is a quirky compendium of true stories from all over Ireland. From the Lismore man who rode to Fermoy in a tub pulled by a pig, a badger, 2 cats, a goose, and a hedgehog, to the fortune discovered in Belfast piano, once owned by destitute sisters, and the Cashel man who insisted on being evicted while lying in his coffin. These strange, zany, and at times downright baffling stories are proof, if ever it was needed, that Ireland is indeed a country packed with a unique and fascinating cast of characters. So again, silly nonfiction. I like. So this one, also going to have to read before swapping it with friends. It also looks brand new, like the spine hasn't even been cracked. So the fact that I found this at Half Price Books was a pretty good find. The next one I found happened to be one that was on my TBR list, but it's the Secret Book and Scone Society by Ellery Adams. So again, looking for books for other people, found one for me. This is a mystery. I can't remember if it's a murder mystery or not. Oh, yeah. Found Dead on Train Tracks. Murder mystery. But honestly, just the vibes of the cover were what drew me in. Secret Book and Scone Society. Love it. Can't eat scones unless they're gluten-free, but love the concept. Next one I grabbed was one that just looked intriguing. I don't know if I'm actually going to read this one or just put it in my swap pile. But this one, is another murder mystery. Clearly I'm on a kick for murder mysteries. But it's called Braised Pork by Anu. And it takes place in Beijing. I think I picked this one because it reminded me a little bit of Crazy Rich Asians from the description. Although I don't think it's quite the like high society that Crazy Rich Asians is, but it's a murder mystery instead. So might try this one, not sure. Next one that I found is one that I have already read. So this one will definitely just go on the swap table. This is Fear Thy Neighbor by Fern Michaels. I honestly don't even remember that much of it. Murder mystery that takes place in a beach house. This is definitely one of those thrillers that you can just breeze through. It's entertaining. It's fast-paced. You will not remember the details after if you read a lot of thrillers like I do. But it was good, so I thought it would be a good swap book. And then the last one I found, because I was so excited reading Big Summer, I discovered there's another one. So this is That Summer by Jennifer Weiner. I don't think it's specifically tied in to Big Summer, but it's the same vibes. So it's another, like, I don't think this one's a murder. It's more of a, like, well, maybe there is murder. I don't remember. But it's another, like, young businesswoman, like, trying to get things up and running, and starts getting emails that are not meant for her. So she has to kind of start putting pieces together to figure out why she's getting these emails. So I'm very excited to read this one, and that one is definitely for me, not for the swap table. But that's it as far as bookish related things for this month. So I'll pop back in next month to show you everything I read in April. Right now I've got a couple of books in progress. I already said that I'm reading Cress, and I'm reading When Evil Comes to Good Heart. I started reading the first couple pages of Circe by Madeline Miller. I think I'm going to have to slog through that one if I finish it at all. I don't want to already say that I'm planning on not finishing it, but it's not the style of writing that I enjoy, and I know that it's one that, like, everybody loves and it's so good, but I'm just not feeling it. So I don't know what to do about that one. I might offer that one to a friend before I just swap it with everybody. Yeah. I don't know how I'm feeling about that one. Maybe I just haven't, like, gotten to the point of, like, really getting into it yet. And then I'm still kind of reading Chasing Vermeer with the book that I was reading with my students, but I switched roles, so I'm covering a different maternity leave now, so they're actually going to finish it without me, and then I'll finish it on my own when I get it back. But yeah, those are, I think, all the books that I have in progress right now. I'm currently on my Easter break, so I'd love to knock out a couple more during break, just to get a couple more books in for April before I go back to work. But that's it as far as book-related things for this month. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing my book haul and everything that I read this month. I definitely like that I've added kind of book-related things into my content here on YouTube. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw today and you like crafty things, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so you can see all my videos here on YouTube. And if you want to follow me on other forms of social media, that information will be in the description box below. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.